History of Black Hollow Lane. Chapter 6. The assignment. Ugh, why do we have to walk all the way to the bloody library for humanities class today? Lola asked. Jack took a deep breath and Emmy smothered a smile. Lola had been grumbling ever since they left the Fine Arts building, and it was definitely grating on Jack's nerves. How is it that you'll run for 2 hours straight at football practice, but you can't walk an extra 10 minutes without going on and on about it? Jack asked. That's just it, Lola said, as they trudged up another flight of stairs. I ran for 2 hours last night, and now I'm a bit tired. Jack shook his head and stuffed his earbuds into his ears. Have you played football? Have you played football for a long time? Emmy asked. Lola nodded. I think my dad bought me a football while my mum was in labour. We go to matches every time I make it back to Glasgow. Emmy smiled, but she didn't feel happy. She'd never known if her dad was a soccer fan. Do you play any sports? Lola asked. Emmy's heart skipped a beat. Well, I used to. She didn't want to explain why her mother wouldn't let her play. She didn't understand it herself. I could never give it up, Lola said, staring down at Keeper, figuring where they'll move next, hearing the crowd cheer. It just becomes part of you. Know what I mean? Emmy did know what she meant. It made her chest ache to think about it. Plus, I get to bash people about without getting into trouble, which is great, Lola winked. And Emmy laughed. Lola seemed like she'd really be a fun person to play with. They walked past the giant oak doors that led to the hall and through the narrow passageway that hitched the strange library tower onto the main building. They threw their bags down and sat at the nearest table just as Master Barlow walked in. He crouched down beside the table and smiled at Emmy. I wanted to check in with you before class started. Are you getting along at Wellsworth so far? Okay, I guess. I hear you joined the Latin Society. If you don't mind my saying so, I think your time might be better spent in one of the humanities disciplines, like the Anglo-Saxon or Shakespeare societies. Shall I speak to Master Labby about transferring you? Oh, no. Emmy wasn't a fan of Latin Society, but at least it gave her a quiet place to catch up on work. She didn't really want to give that up. Madame Boyd really wanted me in Latin Society, so I think I'd better stick with it. Barlow smiled, but he looked a little disappointed. All right, let me know if you change your mind. Latin Society isn't for everyone, you know. He turned away and Emmy frowned. That was 2 teachers who had tried to convince her to leave Latin Society. What's going on? All right, let's get started, Barlow said to the class. I'm sure you're all wondering why we're meeting in the library today. Lola muttered something inaudible, and Emmy shook her head. Lola definitely had a hard time keeping her feelings to herself. We've been talking about the dissolution of the monasteries, Barlow said. I trust by now you all know what a critical part it played in the British history. Who can tell me one of the reasons why the dissolution was so very, very important? The room was quiet. Finally, Natalie raised her hand. The king made himself the head of the Church of England. Correct, Barlow said. That meant he could take all the church's property, assets and artifacts for himself. Many clergy who resisted were executed, and many priceless artifacts were lost or destroyed. And that brings us to our assignment, he went on. You will get into groups of 2 or 3 and research a building that was affected by the dissolution of the monasteries. Did the clergy resist? What kinds of artifacts did the building hold? What happened to them? What has happened to that building since? Extra credit will be given to those who put in extra effort. So this isn't a good assignment to skeeve off on. Everyone started gathering into groups and Emmy bit her lip. Being the new kid usually meant being the last to get picked. So, where do we start? Jack asked. Emmy held her breath. Was Jack just talking to Lola, or did he want Emmy to join them? The architectural section, obviously, Lola said. She grabbed her bag and started marching toward one of the long spiral staircases that led to the upper floors. Jack trailed behind her, but Emmy hung back. Lola started clattering up the staircase and looked over her shoulder. Aren't you coming, Emmy? Emmy smiled and grabbed her bag. She raced up the iron stairs. Does your library really have an architecture section? Of course, Lola said. Didn't yours? Emmy laughed. The last school I went to barely even had a library. We just looked everything up online. I bet that's what most people are doing, Jack whispered to Emmy. They'd probably be done before we've even chosen our building. Lola stomped up the stairs. I heard that. She led them through the maze of stacks and shelves. The library was massive. Its strange octagon shape made it nearly impossible to navigate, but Lola seemed to know it, like the back of her hand. Finally, she stopped in the middle of a row. Here, medieval architecture. How do you know where everything is? Emmy asked. Lola scowled, but didn't say anything. After she slugged Brian in first year, she had to do a little community service, Jack said. I spent 3 months restocking shelves, Lola muttered. I don't see why Brian should have complained. His nose looks much better since I broke it. Why don't you guys get along? Because he's a prat, Lola said. He thinks his side of the family is so much better than ours because they have more money. Emmy blinked. She knew there were people who thought having money made you better than other people. After all, she'd gone to elite private schools all over New England, and she'd even spent a few moments with some plenty snobs. But it was jarring to hear Lola say it so matter-of-factly. Lola pulled an enormous book off the shelf and heaved it onto a nearby table. Gothic architecture in Britain. There ought to be something in here. She flipped the book open and started running her finger over the index. Westminster Abbey, Canterbury Cathedral, York Minster. I don't know, they're all the same to me. Emmy sat down in a nearby window seat. We need something unique, something no one else is doing. I need those extra effort points. She tapped her fingers again against the heavy window pane. The stone passage was right underneath her. Maybe a bridge to the old hall, which had stood for so many centuries, with its aging stonework and crumbling statues. The hall? So many centuries? She jumped out of her seat. The hall! What about it? Jack asked. We should do the hall. It used to be a cathedral, right? I bet it was here before the dissolution of the monasteries. I remember reading that it used to be called Blaishowl Abbey, Lola said. Let's see if we can find it in one of these books. They searched the shelves, pulling off every book they thought might be relevant. About a half hour, Emmy slumped down in her chair and leaned her head against her hand. Has anyone found anything yet? Nope, Lola said. Seems like there's something about every church in the country except this one. Maybe it just wasn't important enough to make it into any books, Jack said. Lola shook her head. But that doesn't make sense. Abbeys were always important. We read about them last year, remember? Not everyone remembers every page of every book they've ever read, Lola. So, what are we going to do? Emmy asked. Should we just pick something else? I think the mezzanine has a section with local history books, Lola said. It's a bit of a long shot, but we could try. The mezzanine was at the top of a set of rickety steps, and it felt more like an attic than a library. Emmy wrinkled her nose. The air stunk of moldy leather and some kind of toxic dung. Are there bats in here? Lola ignored her and walked to the far side of the loft. This is the local history section. I haven't got a clue if we'll find anything. Most of these books are so old they don't even have titles on the covers. Emmy ran her fingers along the dusty leather spines. If they don't even have titles, how are we supposed to... She stopped. One of the books had a strange symbol, a symbol she had seen before. A skull with a cross on the right and a dagger on the left. I've seen this symbol before. She pulled the book off the shelf. It's on a stone outside the Latin Society. Jack took the book from Emmy and looked at the spine. Oh, that just means the book will be in Latin. He put it back on the shelf. I don't think there's anything up here. We should just choose another church. I've never seen that symbol before, and I've been taking Latin for years, Lola said. Is that a skull? Yeah, I think so. Emmy grabbed the book and opened the cracked leather cover. It's not in Latin, and it's called Wellsworth School for Boys and Early History. This is exactly what we need. She looked at Jack. Why did you think it would be in Latin? He chewed his bottom lip. I guess I got the symbol mixed up with something else. Emmy flipped the pages until she found a table of contents. looks like there are 3 whole chapters about Blathole Abbey. That should be enough for our report. I could read them all, Jack said, and tell you guys what they say. No, that's okay, Emmy said. We can each take a chapter. Seriously, I don't mind. I'll just... What's gotten into you? Lola asked. Since when do you want to do extra reading? Jack shrugged his shoulders. I just want to help. We're supposed to do equal work on group projects, Emmy said. But how are we supposed to read all of the book at the same time? Why don't we just photocopy the first 3 chapters and we can take each one? And then leave the book here, Jack said. Emmy nodded. Okay, but just the first 3 chapters, right? What does it matter if... I just don't think we need to do extra reading. We're supposed to learn about the Abbey, not the school. Lola rolled her eyes. It takes, 10 minutes to read a chapter? No, it takes you 10 minutes to read a chapter, Jack glared at Lola. Not all of us are speed readers with a photographic memory, you know. Emmy left them sniping at each other, got the chapters copied, and gave the book to the librarian. Then she handed Jack and Lola a chapter each. We can read them tonight during study session and talk about them after. As soon as study session ended, they all got together at a table near the fire. I can't understand why there aren't more books about Blathole Abbey. Lola glanced at Madame Boyd's door and popped a stick of gum in her mouth. My chapter says it was part of Blathole Monastery, which was a really important place in the Middle Ages. It had one of the biggest art collections in Britain. Their monks were expert metalworkers, and they made amazing things out of silver and pewter. My chapter talks about the monastery too, Emmy said. Apparently, the monks put up a huge fight. The monastery was dissolved. Eventually, they were all executed for treason, but they managed to hide their entire art collection first. Really? Lola said. Where did they hide it? Beats me, Emmy said. Lola looked at Jack. So what's your chapter about? Jack tapped his fingers on the table. Mostly the same stuff as yours. Then it starts talking about the school and there's not much anything useful there. Emmy stared at Jack. Really? Because I read it too and I thought there was lots of stuff we could use. What are you talking about? Lola asked. I flipped through the chapter when I was photocopying it and it looked really interesting, so I photocopied it for myself too. Jack stopped tapping. You read my chapter? I can't believe you. So, what did you dig up? Lola interrupted. It's about the school's founding, and it's got a lot of cool stuff. Listen to this. Emmy began to read. Of all the contributions our school has made to British society, none is greater than our noble brotherhood, the Order of the Black Hollow Lane.